Previously on the Toyota Unlimited Racing Development build.
You're laughing because you were on that side of the exhaust.
No, I could see the flames from this side.
This clearly mentally unstable individual is Marc from Frankenstein Motorworks, the devil on my shoulder who has enabled a 2GR V6 swap in my third generation Toyota MR2. This swap had all the goodies, including a new Haltech R5 ECU. The 3.5-liter Toyota V6 is double the size of the stock 1.8-liter engine that comes in this MR2, and shortly we will find out just how much more horsepower it makes.
As expected so far. Picking up power easy.
Marc has been making naturally aspirated horsepower on the Toyota 2GR V6 for years now, so he's got certain expectations for the power that we'll make here. Making nearly 300 horsepower doesn't impress him.
We need to bring in some of the exhaust cam in. We'll break through that. Damn, it's just teasing us though. I was expecting to break through 300 this time. All right. We are just getting started too.
Unfortunately, there's an electrical gremlin. Marc had to wire the Haltech R5 ECU in just a weekend, which means the wiring harness is a bit of a hodgepodge right now.
This signal wire right here has a bunch of noise on it that is causing us to lose cam sync on that particular cam. We've got our signal, right? Our signal, the voltage is, this high or so, it's 5 volts, but we're getting not just a little bit of noise, but we're getting like plus and minus 3-4 volts worth of noise on it. So it's making it impossible for the ECU to see the square wave that's in it. This is with all the cams are running right now. And then this is we lose one of the intake cams. This one here, it lasted longer. We were on a rip and then we lost one of the intake cams. These things are creating a whole bunch of noise. Even the injectors are creating a bunch of noise. So temporarily, at least, I'm just trying to get this away from those sources of noise. That's with one of the intake cams missing. And that's 310 horsepower. So, like, she's got some in her. We just gotta, talk it out of her.
And then the dyno day ended, and I went home to Virginia without a car. There had been a problem on the dyno. In the intervening time that passed, we went to the United Kingdom, filmed a road trip, and we've got a poster of said road trip for sale. Just as a brief aside, if you'd like to own one, head on over to oildrip.shop. We've got these Sons of Guns for sale. We've got MR2 roll cage shirts, Widowmaker shirts, etc., etc. And then, a month later, I was back.
Dyno Day Part 2. So, last Dyno Day, just like the video, got cut short because of the cam signal problems. And then what you guys didn't get on video is we had a noise. What I thought was in the engine ended up being a loose accessory belt pulley, but we pulled it off the dyno. Now we're back. All of that stuff is fixed. The cam control, we've got proper shielded wire going to the cams. It's the way that it should be, but it's not the way that the factory did it, so I didn't worry about it too much. But either way, it's got shielded wires now. We should have good cam control. So that 320 that we made last time is really just warming up. some more refining, but we've got a nice baseline right now. If we go take a look at the dyno screen, yeah, that's touching 350. There's well, 349.6, which, I mean, that's the curse, right? But no, we're gonna be past 350. That's not gonna be a problem. So we're already 30 horsepower up from where we were before, but that's what happens when the cams work. I think what we wanna do now, because we've got just a baseline VVTi tune in, is go ahead and change the pipe lengths, the manifold runner, which will adjust our curve before we do fine tuning on the VVTi. And then of course, then fine tuning on the ignition and the fuel and whatnot. Like, I think we're still rich. I think we're gonna pick up 15 to 20 wheel, not necessarily peak. Honestly, ideally, it's not gonna be peak. What we're doing is we're moving this whole curve down. We'll bring this horsepower up down here below 5,200 RPM, but there's other factors. This curve down here is not all caused by the intake runner lengths. Well, not happy about that. I mean, in a way, it is what I was expecting. Like, you can see we dropped this peak move 500 RPM down, right? And you can see these peaks here, they wobbled over a little bit further down, about the same 500 RPM. I don't have a good explanation, but we're definitely not picking up 15, 20. We can play with this, and I can definitely get a couple more numbers in this, but I think it's telling us that with these cams, it does not want runner length adjustments. I actually prefer the red curve you've got here because it's giving us a bit more mid-range. This is with the extended runners. I think we're gonna stick with that if you're happy with that, and then just tweak further from there.
Despite runner length not helping peak power much, the engine still made substantial gains in the mid-range, which makes the longer runner length preferable for our on-track application. Now, the final spot to try and find some power would be the fuel.
So we're just using X98 because instead of trying to find the right pump here that's going to give us that proper 85% ethanol, we're just mostly emptying the tank and putting this pure ethanol in, which will give us a known mixture. We do have flex fuel set up, and we'll be able to tell exactly what the concentration is. If we're lucky, it's going to be a bit above that 85% with the fuel left in the tank, but it should be somewhere in that region, and it'll let us tune for max ethanol. It seems that all she wants to give us is 355 wheel horsepower and 296 foot-pounds of torque. But check this out. The last time your car was at this dyno with the 2AR, we made 220. So we picked up what? 135 horsepower and 90 foot-pounds of torque. I think, right here, Ben. I think this is what you're gonna need. All of the roll cage.
I'll make sure that they show footage of Marc's grin at my funeral. So here are the takeaways. 355 wheel horsepower, 295 pound-feet of torque from a 3.5-liter minivan engine with stockish Toyota internals in a car that weighs less than 2,300 pounds. For reference, we dynoed the MR2 at 107 wheel horsepower with the factory original 1ZZ engine, meaning that we are now making over 3 times the horsepower this car came with stock. Thank God for this roll cage. So we are now back in Virginia in the Gears and Gasoline shop, and the car is running. The car is making 355 wheel horsepower, 295 pound-feet of torque. Now we need to do a little bit of buttoning up before we can actually really drive this car around. So first of all, obviously we have a giant hole in the firewall, so we need to button that up. Got this this sheet of aluminum that kind of bent and molded to fit here, and it drops in not too shambly. I spent a few hours shaping and cutting metal to cover off the firewall, and eventually had a pretty serviceable piece, which could still be quickly removed to allow access to the alternator, dipstick, cylinder head, and so on. I've ordered some gasket material, sort of like this, like a D-seal, that is going to adhere to the edges of that access panel, and then kind of seal the whole area, because in the event of like a fire or something like that, if you have small holes, then a lot of the time they become pressurized and almost like a little flamethrower or something like that. So we're trying to seal access entirely away from the cabin. While we're waiting on some of these additional parts for the firewall, it's obviously great that we have the V6 in, everything's running, ECU's all hooked up. It makes a bunch of power, but in order for this car to safely run at a racetrack, we have to remember that it's still a minivan engine and it needs some oil cooling. So we made sure that we got a version of the oil pan that had oil cooler hookups from like a RAV4 with the tow package or whatever. This is said oil cooler from PWR. You probably can't read that, but PWR makes universal oil coolers made in Australia, and this is a great location to run it right here. So we are sponsored by Radium. I finally actually asked them to send me some stuff. So we've got some nice fittings for the oil cooler, like super low profile adapters, and they pivot. And then we've just got tons and tons of AN line. This is gonna increase the oil capacity of the car by quite a bit, because we're gonna be running all the way from the engine in the back up to the front for the oil cooler to get airflow, and then all the way back. So decent amount of increase in oil capacity, I should imagine. Bunch of dash 10 line, PWR product, meet Radium product. Beautiful, a match made in heaven. One of these days, guys, I'm gonna be able to combine like Haltech product with a PWR product, or a quad lock on a Haltech, and man, it's gonna be Australian heaven. I apologize in advance, PWR. I'm gonna put a riv nut in your oil cooler.
At what point do you get an honorary Australian citizenship?
I don't know. I've been checking the mail, waiting every day. Ooh, it's almost perfect as it is. So we're going to do a little L bracket right here, and that way we can have 4 mounting points all on the bottom here. Hey, I'm getting pretty good at measuring, gang. We've got to run the lines. So we can start by building one end of the line. A little bit of this. We have PTFE hose. I've never used PTFE hose before. Typically using the rubber hose with braided wire around it. Not this PTFE stuff, which is Teflon wrapped in braided steel. So that's roughly where we need to be at. So we can start building these connections. Because you've got this Teflon here in the center instead of rubber, you gotta treat it a little bit differently. So you slip this on, and then you want to actually slip this piece in between the braided line and the actual Teflon in the center. So there's always something really unpleasant about doing AN fittings, whether it's PTFE or a rubber line. And this looks like the unpleasant part with PTFE. It's going nowhere. This is the part of the video where I could just put all this PTFE assembly footage to a nice song and not mention how annoyed I got trying to learn how to deal with all the little issues I was getting trying to fit all this together, but I did have issues. Assembling AN lines is always a bit of a pain and has a bit of a learning curve, and this was no exception. So this right here is just a little adapter plate that allows you to run AN fittings, to run whatever oil cooler you want off of that OEM Toyota oil pan. So we're gonna take advantage of it. After going through a couple of iterations of fittings to fit into the tight space between the engine and firewall, I settled on a pair of -10 AN banjo fittings, which were able to fit directly into the adapter plate itself. Now you might be saying, wait, I don't understand. I thought this oil adapter plate was for this application, and it is made for a 2GR oil cooler, but Wilhelm Raceworks has mostly done all of his R&D on SW20 chassis. So there's more space in those between the firewall and the engine. And we will have the splitter that goes here, right? Splitter sits on here, locks in place here and here, and it'll keep the lines from ever touching anything on the ground. This is what the oil cooler setup looks like with the front splitter installed. The only uncertainty is oil pressure. I need to be sure that we will not lose oil pressure with the line length or banjo bolt flow restriction, so we're going to test that later in this episode. But first, the intake. Another obvious roadblock between us and driving the car is probably not going to drive the car around like that. So we've got to figure out a way to route the intake in such a way that we can put an engine cover on. And keeping in mind that this is a full-on race car, I have some designs for what I would like to do with this intake. Not literal designs yet. We could try and tuck this intake in the engine bay like a normal routing system would work, but I'm wondering if a ram air intake wouldn't be cooler. It's gonna take a little bit of designing, but I think the first step is just to mock up with maybe some piping what we're trying to hit angle-wise. The ultimate goal is to kind of like build the ram air system into the engine cover so that you can kind of just like pop it on and off as like one piece. Obviously we wouldn't want to actually put this here. This, I think ideally would go up here and then have some other kind of filter system that's a little bit more aerodynamic and like a scoop versus a cone. And then just have a filter in line, kind of like what Ben Thorne has on his Civic headlight thing. So the idea is essentially, I think that this pipe should be cut flush with the hole that I cut in the engine cover, okay? So that when you put the engine cover on, it just like automatically seals the pipe. And then the engine cover should have a little piece on top that basically turns it into a snorkel that goes forward and then just runs like low profile up the back of the glass here, you know, glass up to a scoop here. Think NSXR or basically any, you know, mid-engine track car.
Hello? Been trying to contact you about your extended car warranty?
None of this snorkel is going to get fabricated in this episode because we've got about a week until we're going to the racetrack, which means we'll just be laying the groundwork for our future Ram air system. In the short term, I cut a hole in the engine cover and line it with some trim rubber, then allow the Frankenstein Motorworks mass airflow intake to poke out just a tasteful amount past the engine cover.
Not half bad, huh?
Now obviously I'm not going to take this car for a first drive without a little bit of safety. I've got my fire suppression system, I've made sure that the wheels are tight, but most importantly, I've got my quad locks.
Using Quadlock's ultra secure mounting system, I know that when I lock my phone in place, it's staying there, no matter how many kilowatts the car's making. Roll bar? Yeah, nah, no problem, mate. Quadlock's got a mount for that too, and it means that I can put my camera wherever my little heart desires without a worry of it becoming detached. You want to get a cool shot of your distinctly phallic Ram air intake? Yeah, no problem, mate. Go ahead and attach one of these heavy-duty suction cups to your makeshift firewall, and you're more likely to rip the firewall off than you are to lose your action cam. Quadlock, for when you're almost definitely going to die, but you want to make sure that your phone and cameras don't.
This is literally my first time ever driving this car with the V6 in it. I'm a little scared. I think that's healthy. I think it's healthy to have a fear of things that can hurt you, especially if you're driving with a 6-point harness and no Hans. Well, we've got our makeshift firewall installed. Go ahead and start recording a log. Man, it's so loud with such a thin firewall right there. Oh, there's the splitter. Clutch in and then it would go wah. It rips though. I was short shifting like a little child, if little children could drive cars. Let's see. It's so smooth because it's just, you know, a big V6, or I guess a little V6, I don't know, it depends on your perspective. No turbo or whatever, so it's not like you get some insane torque wave. It's super linear. This is gonna be really fun on track. This is gonna be really fast. The speed with which it's getting through the gears is alarming.
Back in the garage for a bit more data, I threw on the hardtop and busted out the scales. About a half tank of fuel. We're gonna check and see how much this thing weighs. 2357 without driver, 60-40 or 40-60 I should say split front to rear. Not half bad. With me in the car, the MR2 came out to 2,533 pounds, or just shy of 1,150 kilograms. For reference, an OEM MR2 Spider weighs 2,185 pounds versus my 2,357, and has a weight distribution of 43% front, 57% rear versus my 40/60. Not bad for over triple the horsepower. You may also recall that a couple of minutes ago I said I wanted to double check and make sure that we were getting sufficient oil pressure to the engine with the oil cooler installed, and we did check that, and I'm very glad that we did, because if we had run this car on the racetrack with the oil cooler installed the way it is currently, we probably would blow the engine. So this is a screenshot of a log that I took driving the car with the oil cooler uninstalled, and you'll see here this spike of RPM. We are hitting 71, 7,200 RPM and a very healthy 76 PSI of oil pressure. Some people might even say too much oil pressure, but we are not at risk of oil starving the motor at that PSI. And you'll see that kind of matches up throughout the rest of the log. Anytime we hit a high RPM spike, we get an accompanying spike in oil pressure to go along with it that matches up with the RPM curve. That's what you want to see. Unfortunately, this is a screenshot of a log that I took driving the car with the oil cooler installed, and you see that here we're hitting basically the same 71, 7,200 RPM, but the oil pressure is only hitting 56 PSI, and it really is never able to get over 55 PSI. We go on further down through this log, and at the end you'll see another even higher RPM spike, and the oil pressure barely breaks above 50, if at all. So unfortunately, that is definitely not enough oil pressure for the RPM that we are hitting. Certainly not enough for a track day. Now, there is nothing wrong with the design of the oil cooler adapter plate. There's nothing wrong with those banjo bolts. There's nothing wrong with the radium lines that we use, and there's nothing wrong with the PWR oil cooler. It is just something about the combination of those parts with the weight of the oil that I'm using that is causing us to get insufficient oil pressure at the RPM that we need it at. Maybe the lines are too long, maybe those banjo bolts don't flow enough oil at the viscosity that I'm running. So we've taken the oil cooler kit off for the track day that we're going to run, because I don't foresee us running into temp issues on a test day, and we will revisit this. Maybe I need to shorten the lines, maybe I need to run something that doesn't involve banjo fittings. To be determined. Also to be determined is whether this engine swap will be effective on the racetrack. It certainly seems as though it should be. We've gone from 250 horsepower in the 2AR configuration to 355 with the V6. But will it be reliable? And even more worrying, will the car try to kill me? All these questions and more will be answered next weekend when we take this car back to VIR.